welcome! In my last video I promised you a garden tour, so this week we're going to have a bit of a garden tour. The garden is seriously behind this year, and whether we'll have a long enough season for stuff to mature and fruit and produce, I do not know. I was very late planting anything seed-wise. It was so cold and wet, miserable and horrible this spring. We have very nicely had about 2, possibly 3 weeks of glorious weather, which has given me a chance to get some grass cut, tidy the place up a bit and actually put some young plant starts in the ground. But they're still very tiny and small, except for, I would say, the sweet corn. That's actually doing quite nicely. So last summer when I grew sweet corn, I left 2 cobs on the sweet corn plants unharvested and allowed them to stay with the plants until they died back with the cold of the winter. At which point I harvested the dry cobs and kept them stored indoors throughout the winter. Not confident in the viability of my seeds, and I'm not sure why I wouldn't be, I wanted to test a few just to see what the germination rate was like. So I planted 8 individual kernels of corn and had 8 corn plants germinate. So these are the 8 I first planted in February just to test the viability of my seeds. I only noticed this morning they're starting to produce the little tassely bits. They're not tassels. The tassels are on the sweet corn cobs themselves. The little pollen bits that grow at the top of the corn plants. They're not particularly tall. I'm stood at ground level, as are the plants, and they're only just reaching my chest. Normally when they start producing the pollen tassels, they're as tall as me. But that's fine. I'm quite happy to have sweet corn on a small plant. So I don't know, we'll see how well they manage to produce. Now, having proved that my seeds were perfectly viable, at the end of March I've planted some more. In this bed I planted 15 sweet corn kernels and they all germinated again, but this was the end of March. It might have even been the first week of April, so they're much further behind and only about 18 inches tall at the moment. I did lose one. I think it got munched by slugs and snails when they first went in, and something was nibbling on the leaves, so my lower leaves are a bit tattered. But now the plants are getting taller and out of reach. Whatever it was seems to have stopped bothering them, thankfully. Something else that was getting seriously nibbled this year were the peas that are behind me. So here are my pea plants, and there aren't very many. I planted very many more, but some little mouse decided they would make a lovely tasty snack. It was most disheartening. Like everything I've planted this year, it was late in the season for me to be putting them in, so they're not as big as they normally would be at this time of year. A few of them are starting to produce little pea pods though. And now I've put the netting on the polytunnel. It's a more comfortable temperature in here. Usually it gets too hot for the peas, and the scorching heat of the summer kills them off as they dry out and crisp up. This year I can hopefully keep it slightly cooler in here, and they will survive a bit longer than normal. Was that tomato? Can you see it? Yes. My tomato plants have been having a rough time too. Planted late, so they're a bit behind. When I put them out in the garden, the slugs have gone on the rampage. They seem to be causing a lot of gardeners a lot of problems this year. The slugs and snails have had the perfect weather throughout our winter and early spring. I'm sure there are many more of them than there used to be. They're certainly creating a lot of damage. This particular tomato plant was doing really well. I think it was the healthiest one I've got at the moment. The other day, some slug razored up the side of its stem and it fell over. So I've buried it. Here is where its stem is originally planted. But when it had its side munched off and the plant fell over, I've left it laid on the ground and covered all that area in mud and soil in the hope that the rest of the plant will carry on growing and put out new roots. Now that was a couple of days ago and it's still looking really healthy. So I have high hopes it's going to continue to survive quite well, even though it will have had a bit of a setback. My beans are one plant that seems to be doing very well, even after being sown late in the season. I've only got one or two of each variety of bean. I mainly planted this year not so much to get a harvestable crop, but to grow seeds in order to grow lots more bean plants next year. So the beans I'm growing this year are different varieties to give me a seed crop. One I'm particularly looking forward to is the orca bean, which is black and white, a bit like the Chinese yin-yang sign, or the colours on an orca whale. I'm sure that's where its name comes from. I have planted a selection of cucumbers, melons and squashes, but like everything else, it's still very small for June. I think they were one of the last sets of seeds that I put in anywhere, so we could have been rolling into early May. I'm really not confident these plants are going to have a long enough warm season to produce much of anything as far as fruit is concerned. But it definitely won't grow if I don't plant it. So I've got them in the ground at least, and we'll just hope for a nice mild autumn and a good summer before then. Now cucumbers and melon and a couple of squash are here in the polytunnel, and I've also planted only 4 squash outside. Here in the outdoor garden, making use of some of the netting I had left from covering the big polytunnel, I've made myself a little polytunnel. I suppose it's not a polytunnel because it's not covered in polythene. This is just an enormous cloche. The hoop framework I'm using here was originally part of a small 6-foot by 10-foot plasticky greenhouse structure. The plastic has long since been blown about, battered, torn, scrunched up and thrown in the bin. But the framework is in quite good condition still. It'll certainly do a couple of years before it all completely rusts, as these things tend to do. So I've made a little short structure to protect my young squash. And it lifts up nice and easily, and I can just roll it away from me to get to the plants inside. We can lay it down again. There we go. Oof. In my new netted structure, I have 4 squash plants, not very big at the moment, and we're into June. We have a crown prince and then 2 curry plants, and then at the end here I have a tromboncino squash, which is a new variety for me. I've not grown it before, so I'm hoping I might get at least 1 fruit off of it. They're heavily covered in strulch to try and keep the slugs away, and so far it seems to be working. And behind them I've actually planted a row of sunflower seeds. Nothing to be seen at the moment though. I literally only planted the sunflower seeds about 3 days ago, and I'm not honestly expecting to get sunflowers from them. Again, it was more a case of, well, if I don't plant seeds, I definitely won't get any. So let's plant them and see. And as I've planted straight into the ground, I'm expecting the moment they dare to pop their heads out, they're going to get munched off by a slug. But we'll see. Nothing ventured, nothing gained. So I'm going to give it a go. Everything's behind and everything's late, and I have no expectations for anything to give me a wonderful crop, simply because it doesn't have the length of season to be able to do that. But I'm still going to plant things and live in hope that we might get something. I've planted just a few seed potatoes. Now they didn't go in as late as everything else. They're actually doing quite well. So I have high hopes of a reasonable potato crop. I lost one. There's an empty space. And I can't remember what variety I planted. They were just seed potatoes. I have already harvested my first handful of potatoes just this morning. I was clearing another bed ready to put some dahlias into. There was an old potato plant growing there that's obviously sprouted from a potato left behind on a previous harvest. So I have a nice handful of potatoes ready for tonight's supper. Delicious. I didn't plant them on purpose, and I wasn't expecting any harvest, so that's always a bonus. Now for the dahlias. These are my enormous dahlia tubers, and I took the risk of not digging them up last winter, which is a risk. Although we're generally quite mild, every 4 or 5 years we'll get a really harsh winter. That's not true. We'll get a harsh winter for our area, which will leave us with 2 or 3 weeks in icy frost. Enough to split and kill off and see the end of our dahlias. So I knew I was taking a risk and we might get a harsh winter that would just kill them off and wipe them out. But was prepared for that and acceptant that I would just buy new tubers and start again this season. We had such a miserable, horrible, wet, revolting spring, I didn't bother buying any dahlias. I was also aware that just under the surface, if I scraped away the topsoil, I could see the hard, firm tubers of my dahlia plants. So I was hopeful they would manage to make a comeback. And they did. I saw the beginnings of dahlia growth and little green shoots. Then they got razored off with the slugs. The dahlias started to grow again and got razored off with the slugs. So every time they dare to pop a little shoot out of the ground, the slugs are eating them off. They don't stand a chance. So 2 or 3 days ago, I lifted these and dug them up. They've been sitting in the shed since then. And I'm going to transfer them from the in-ground new flower garden space up here to my raised garden beds, in the hope they might manage to survive the slugs. I'm also going to give them a covering in strulch, which is something I hadn't done in their previous growing position. And hopefully, even if they don't flower this year, which is fine, they will at least get a chance to grow, put up some leaves and continue fattening up these tubers. Now, whether I will risk them in the ground this winter or I'll dig them up, I don't know. We'll see how I feel when winter gets here. So let's dig some holes and put these dahlias back in the ground. You can see with this smaller tuber where it's been constantly putting up new growth shoots, and every time it puts up a new shoot to grow, its top's been chomped off. dahlia. It's going to need a big hole. Pull it back in. Ordinarily, I would fill this hole with water before I plant my plant. Fill it with water, let that soak away. But we are forecast about 2 weeks worth of showery rain. So I'm not going to water it. It's got the moisture in its fat potato-like tubers to keep it going for a couple of days. And although it's been dry for a week or two, the ground is still quite dark and moist. I should have put my gloves on, they're sitting there. Never mind. Oh, another potato. Yummy. What I am going to cover my dahlias with is some strelch. It's a kind of chopped up strawy mulch that supposedly deters the slugs and snails. And it does seem to work, for me at least. So I've only got a little bit here. I've got a bag full down in the shed. I'll go and get that and put about an inch layer on top of my dahlias. It'll act as a good weed suppressant, as well as hopefully keeping those slugs at bay. You can have that there. Right, let's go get some more. Something that is already growing splendidly in this to-be dahlia bed are these breadseed poppies. There's a couple little ones here. Something else that's been taking a massive hammering from the slugs and snails are these leeks. Now I have a couple of leeks and onions in the end of this bed that live here all the time. I never harvest them, I leave them every year to put up flower stems and flower. I quite like the flowers, and so do the insects. But the slugs and snails have been so rampant this year. This cluster of leeks has been left with no leaves at all, just its tall flower stalks. Here you can see the base of those tall flowering leeks. There are no leaves left. It is just a stalk. Going up and up and up and up, and a flower bud at the top. So they're still going to flower, which will be nice. How much energy they're going to have left to put back into next year's bulb, I don't know. I'm not sure if you call a leek a bulb. What is that fleshy stem that we eat? Next door to it, more leeks, and it's doing fine. It's only a couple feet away. This one's been devastated, and these don't look too bad. But behind it there are some onions. And the onions are also getting stripped to the ground. Nothing, just the flower stalk. Another plant suffering the same rampant slug attack are these Agapanthus globemaster. All the leaves have been munched off, and I have been strolching and slug pelleting round this one. Something that does appear to be doing very well this year is this elephant garlic. Now I purchased 5 cloves of elephant garlic last autumn, one of which had a thin slither of garlic clove at the side of it. So I separated that and managed to plant 6 cloves of garlic. Now they did produce scapes, which I have already snapped off, harvested and fried up with dinner. They were delicious. The leaves are just starting to turn yellow. Now ordinarily I would leave these in the ground for another couple of weeks. But as I've just mentioned, we are forecast a couple of weeks wet, rainy weather. And I don't know if I want to leave them out in the rain when the plants are starting to die off. I just have no idea. I'm going to pull one up today and see how they're looking and see what I think. If they're very underdeveloped, I'll leave the rest of them in. Well, the mulch is doing its job. The soil's nice and moist. Let me get this in by hand. Ooh, well, there's the bulb. I don't know how big it's going to get. This is the first time I've grown elephant garlic, so I'm excited to see how big they've actually got. I'm digging around it very carefully as I don't want to spike my trowel into the bulb. Oh, there's a hole there. Something's been tunnelling in here. A little mouse, I suspect. Well, that'll be my tiny one. Even if it just produces a clove that I can plant next year, it will be fine. A bit like my beans. I mainly put these in to expand the crop. Oh. I'm nervous of damaging it. Oh, hello worm. Go over this side with the soil. There you go. Move this off so I can get in. Oh, it's huge. I'm happy with this one. Let's get it out of the ground. It's really anchored in there very strongly. I might have been better off with my spade than my little trowel. Yay! Oh, it's got a tiny bit there. What's that? Is that a baby garlic? There's a little tiny one. There's another little one. 2 baby garlics. Is that seeds for next year? I don't know. Oh, there's more. It's the sort of thing I expect of the lilies. So there's just 4. So I've got 4 little tiny ones. I wonder if they'll grow into big elephant garlics in a couple of years. Oh, 5. Another one. Is that another one there? 6. Wow. 6 little garlics. Right, let's have a look at this. Wow, there's my fist, there's my garlic. I'm happy with that. Nice. Oh, where are we? Can we get a thumbnail? Now, I've not grown elephant garlic before, so I don't know how big I expect them to get. Feels like it's developed a bit of a clove inside. I've harvested this one and it is great. I'm going to leave the other 5 for now and see how they get on. If the plants aren't looking very healthy, I'll dig them out. I'm just going to leave this one probably in the polytunnel to dry out, or the shed. I don't know. Can't show you now. I've got these 6 little tiny bulblets. Does anybody know? Can you let me know in the comments? Are these going to grow into garlics for the future? I have no idea. I've not grown elephant garlic before, and I certainly wasn't expecting these little bulbs on the side. Oh, I've just found one in the soil. 7. They're multiplying. I've already googled it, and yes, you can plant the little tiny garlic corms. It'll take them 2 or 3 years to grow into full-size garlic bulbs. Wonderful, an extra bonus. I don't know if I should plant these little seeds now or keep. I don't know what to do with them. Put them in a pot and see what they do. So although the dahlias have been having a really rough time this spring, the rest of the meadow garden is settling in quite nicely. Yes, things are getting munched by slugs and snails, but as they develop and get bigger, hopefully there'll be enough plant that the snails can't eat all of it. Beside me here I have a mullein about to flower, so that'll look splendid. Oh, it's already been looking splendid with its silvery fluffy leaves. But it's definitely starting to get more a feel of a garden here than a grassy field. Where you see that black compost bin in the top left corner is the bed the dahlias were in. So when I dug them up a couple of days ago, I've covered it all in grass again, preparing it for its next set of planting. But walking through this area is lovely as things start to get established. Oh, a mallow plant we're passing here. Should have pretty pink flowers on. A little baby hollyhock that's going to flower for the first time this year. It should have almost black coloured flowers, certainly a deep, dark, plummy purple. That's the seeds I planted anyway. Let's see what it actually flowers with. This was the first bed I planted. It's getting very nicely established. Let's go down and see the oxeye daisies. This is what we're coming to see, this sea of oxeye daisies. Yes, they're in amongst the grass. It's not mulched and covered. Strong enough to cope with that. I was just about to leave you when I noticed the tea tree is in full flower. This is the kind of tea tree they have in Australia that the bees make the Manuka honey from. I am growing it here in the south of the UK. It's hard to think I planted it from a dusty little seed many years ago, and now it's taller than me. A shrubby bush absolutely bursting with beautiful little white blossoms. Let's go and take a closer look. Just for a hint of scale, this is the tea tree now. As I say, bigger than me. I remember it as a tiny little seedling sitting on the bedroom window ledge, buzzing with bees. Some local beekeepers going to get some extra special honey this year. There I'm going to leave it for today with these busy bees buzzing around this beautiful tea tree plant. Bye for now and thanks for watching. Remember, whatever you do, have fun doing it.